Have 500,000 FPL managers made a mistake selling Alexander Isak going into game week 4? We're going to be discussing that in today's video alongside all of the players that you need to buy, avoid and sell going into game week 4. So as always, if you look forward to today's video, make sure you do smash a like, aiming for 400 on this video. And of course, if you haven't already, make sure you do smash that subscribe button. And enough waffling, let's get into today's video. So there's no other place we can kick off today's video than looking at Alexander Isak, who I mentioned has been sold by over 500,000 FPL managers. And spoiler alert, as you can see, I think that there is a world where we need to keep him in our FPL teams, and we've got to discuss exactly that. So a quick recap. Isak, 8.5 million, so I get it. Bit of a cash cow in our FPL teams for certain managers that are going for other premiums in the team. But a goal and an assist, so 2 attacking returns from an expected goal involvement of 1.4. And I want to go through some of the pros before we actually come to some sort of conclusion on Alexander Isak. So the big thing about him, we knew this already going into the season, that he is the second best FPL forward regardless. Erling Haaland is in another world of his own, then it is Alexander Isak. We saw that last season. We are getting an elite finisher on penalties, a talisman, and importantly, as I've mentioned here, no European football. So the game time for him is pretty much locked in. When we couple into the fact as well, Callum Wilson being injured for the start of the season, Alexander Isak is the definition of a value forward, even at 8.5 million. During pre-season, we were talking about how this is one of the most underpriced players in the game. 1 goal and an assist later, and he's being sold by everybody. And I, for one, think it is a little bit premature, a bit knee-jerky by managers to be selling him going into the upcoming fixtures, because when we take a look at him, I have got it as a bit of a negative that the fixtures are mixed, but Wolves away, who have started the season quite poorly themselves, Fulham away, who are always a tricky team, but I always expect Newcastle to score against most teams. Then game week 6 is a tricky one at home against Man City. But of course, if you're a manager right now that is looking to wildcard in game week 6, then I wouldn't be looking at these next two thinking Isak can't deliver over that period. And then after that, Everton, Brighton, Chelsea, I actually think they're great fixtures for Alexander Isak as a forward. So I don't think the fixtures are as bad as what managers are making out. Now, the reason why managers are getting rid of him, and let's be real, is to actually downgrade him to a cheaper forward to then enable a move to Mo Salah. And that is the only reason why I can get behind maybe getting rid of Alexander Isak as part of a free transfer move. Of course, we're going to be touching on those Liverpool midfielders in a minute in today's video. But for me, Alexander Isak is one of those players that absolutely can sit in your team week in, week out, and he will deliver. Newcastle themselves have been a little bit underwhelming, but as I mentioned, we're coming into a really tricky period right now. Between game weeks 4 and 5, we have teams like Aston Villa, Liverpool, Man City, Arsenal with Champions League fixtures, and their attention is naturally going to be drawn towards those games. Newcastle, on the other hand, no European football considerations. They are solely focused on building that Premier League form. And I think we could actually see a bit of a consistent period from Newcastle over the next 6 game weeks. So, as I mentioned, for me, Alexander Isak is a keep in your FPL teams. If you have 2 free transfers, 3 free transfers, and you're looking to then maybe get to Mo Salah, I understand it. Isak down to a Calvert-Lewin or a João Pedro to then upgrade Saka to Mo Salah does make a lot of sense. And as I mentioned, I'm fine with that move. But otherwise, if you're just selling Alexander Isak to get rid of him, I really do think it is a massive mistake. And in that case, he is 100% a keep in your FPL teams. And I think I would not be surprised if he scores a lot over this period. So coming to the first avoid going into game week 4, and it is going to be Aston Villa's Onana. Now, I was flabbergasted when I came onto the top transfers going into game week 4, and he is in the top 5 most bought players going into the weekend. Now, he has 2 goals, which is worth noting. 2 goals from an XG of 0.96. So it's really good. And when we look at someone like a Morgan Rogers, who is at the same price in this Aston Villa team, Onana's the one that's picking up the bonus points and the goals right now. So I understand it. If you were looking at the FPL app and you were looking at cheap midfielders, Onana is actually the one that is delivering right now. And I totally understand it. If you're looking at Onana and you're looking at Morgan Rogers and you're just looking at output, Onana gets the pick right now going into game week 4. The big thing about him as well is that in terms of actual general play, he has been one of the most outstanding players for Aston Villa alongside Morgan Rogers. So I think while he has been coming off slightly early in certain games, I think his game time is pretty locked in. I think he is a key part of this Unai Emery team. The big thing though, as I've mentioned here, the return of the Champions League. We have to take that into consideration, especially for a team like Aston Villa, who, yes, they have a manager who's experienced in these sort of competitions, but Aston Villa themselves, with the squad depth that they have, I think could be a team that actually get hindered by European football rather than benefit from it. And I think Onana is definitely in Unai Emery's starting 11. And if we were to have the assumption that maybe Onana is going to be playing midweek between game weeks 4 and 5 and between game weeks 6 and 7, then we could see maybe some minutes managed for Onana where the preference is for that Champions League. So I think Onana has been ticking over really nicely, but is he a buy going into your teams? Absolutely not. And if you're wildcarding right now, he would be nowhere near my team. Now, first and foremost, main reason is because Morgan Rogers is the same price. Now, it's worth noting, the underlying numbers for Onana are actually slightly better than that of Morgan Rogers. He's got a better XG, but if you've watched the games, you will see that those chances that he scored have come from real big goal scoring opportunities. Both of them have been in front of the goal and from set pieces, and he is going to remain a massive threat for Aston Villa as a set piece player. But is that a consistent route of returns? I personally don't think it is. While he'll be a menace, and I do think he'll keep getting goals, I just don't think it is actually a way of understanding where we're going to get consistent returns from him. We could easily see him blank in the next 3, get a set piece goal against Man United, away against Fulham, and then blank the rest. And for me, these sorts of players are very difficult to predict where the returns are going to come. And I actually prefer Morgan Rogers at the same price, even though he hasn't had any FPL returns right now. So for me, Onana has ticked over lovely, but because of the difficulty of understanding when the points are going to come and basically being a defensive midfielder box to box, I just prefer having the number 10 or the second forward in Morgan Rogers if you are going to go for an Aston Villa midfielder. And for that reason, I think Onana is a void for game week 4. So the first buy in today's game week 4 video is going to be controversially a defender in the shape of Lewis Dunk. Now, we had to get a defender here at some point. And again, I need to reiterate this, that European football is coming around between game weeks 4 and 5 for Champions League, between game weeks 5 and 6 for Europa League. So I do think teams are going to be impacted negatively by this. So maybe going for defenders who are in teams that have no European football involvement is the route to go for. Hence why I don't have an Aston Villa defender in this. Konsa going off injured, I think that could just impact Aston Villa negatively alongside their Champions League involvement. So I do think Brighton, for the next 2 game weeks in particular, are a good investment if you're looking for that type of player. So going through the pros, as I've mentioned, Ipswich and Nottingham Forest in the next 2 are great. I don't see bags of goals from both of these teams. And I think Brighton have held a good account for themselves in the opening 3 game weeks, especially against tough opposition in game weeks 2 and 3. So I think Brighton are a team that, again, very small sample size, but I think we can actually invest in with a little bit of confidence right now. As I touched on, no European football, which is a big factor. We know that Dunk is going to play week in, week out. And this Brighton team is going to be well rested in each game that they do have. And again, guaranteed game time, which is the name of the game, really. We want those players that we know are going to consistently play 90 minutes for their respective teams. But, of course, as always, there are going to be negatives with any player that we're looking to buy. Tricky game week 6 to 8 period. So Chelsea, Spurs, Newcastle, then Wolves. As I mentioned, you are buying him basically for the next 2 game weeks. But as I've mentioned there, he is a wildcard 6 pick. So if your strategy is looking to wildcard in game week 6, I don't think there are many better defenders over the next 2 game weeks than Lewis Dunk, knowing that you're going to get rid of him in your wildcard team in game week 6. But it's worth noting, even if you do need to hold him long term, if you've got a player that could rotate really well with Brighton, I don't think it's a terrible pick at all. You could bench him in game week 6. If you have to play him in game week 7, it's not great, but it's not the end of the world. And playing him in game week 9. So I still think if you need to hold him long term, you could rotate him very easily with another 4.5 million defender, maybe someone like an Everton defender if you had to go there. The other thing I need to mention, a lack of attacking returns. When we're looking at defenders in the game right now, we got people like Robinson, we got the Liverpool fullbacks, we got Rico Lewis, all of these players that are picking up fantastic positions in the game. Dunk, not so much. Yes, he is a set-piece threat, but realistically, we're maybe getting 1 to 3 goals over the course of the season. So we're not expecting big returns from Dunk. He should take over with clean sheets and that's it. Maybe the occasional bonus point. So we're not getting a glamorous player, but I do think with guaranteed minutes in a team that have no European football, this is a wise investment for your FPL teams. So next up, of course, we have to talk about Liverpool, and we're going to talk about these two in particular, Luis Diaz and Mo Salah. Which one should we prioritize in our FPL team? So first and foremost, let me cover this. If you're wildcarding right now in game week 4, I don't think you overthink it. You put Mo Salah in your team. I just think if you go without him and he delivers in game week 4, in game week 5 when Man City play against Arsenal, you want Mo Salah as a captaincy pick with Bournemouth at home. And if you go without him, getting to him in game week 5 is going to be an absolute disaster. So I just think you have to put him in your teams if you are wildcarding right now. Save the hassle and the stress of not having him in your teams. And as I mentioned, Champions League is coming. We've already seen Diaz and Diogo Jota, players like that, coming off early. I think that is going to continue with the likes of Gakpo and Darwin Núñez. And while Mo Salah is the oldest of the bunch, I still think he is the least at risk of rotation. Even though they have signed someone like a Chiesa, I still think Mo Salah's game time is going to be, while rotational, because it has to be over this period, the best of the bunch. And when he is the most expensive, you do also need to have that confidence that he is going to play the most minutes. And I still think he is that player. Now, take a look at the underlying numbers, because if you're not on a wildcard, I still think there is a debate to be had. I think we do need to get ourselves another Liverpool attacker, or at least one if you haven't got one already. But for some managers that are sat there with Isak Saka, you can easily downgrade to a Luis Diaz, and I think that's a great pick. But a lot of managers want to get to Mo Salah. So the big question is, do you force a move to Mo Salah, or can Luis Diaz actually cover, quote unquote, Salah over this period? So look at the underlying numbers. We know that Diaz has been the value pick in this Liverpool attack right now. And his underlying numbers are good, 0.92 expected goals compared to Mo Salah's 0.64. And I need to say, this is based on per 90 minutes. Diaz has played slightly less minutes, so we do need to take that into account when we are looking at over the last 3 game weeks. But outside of that, Mo Salah is ticking over so nicely. Shots 3.42, which is fantastic. Shots on the box at 3.42. And in terms of expected assists, he's always going to be the chance creator in this Liverpool team, 0.51 compared to Luis Diaz's 0.43, and big chances created as well. So Mo Salah is continuing that mantle of being a chance creator in this Liverpool team, but also added, as we know, the goal threat. And when we were looking at the heat maps previously, Luis Diaz has been great, but Mo Salah is consistently getting in that box. And I do think returns are going to continue for him. Whereas with Luis Diaz, I think he's been fantastic. And to be honest with you, even though he's been scoring some crazy finishes, his underlying numbers continue to be good. So even though he's actually converting difficult chances, he's been missing some easy ones as well. So if that continues, I think he's just going to continue to deliver FPL points each and every game week. So the big problem is, end of the day, if you can get to Mo Salah, I just think you go there. I think it is worth the extra 5 million, especially for the captaincy. But if you can't easily get to Mo Salah, I think we're taking a risk with all Liverpool players right now, buying them because of AC Milan away between game weeks 4 and 5. We need to take that into consideration. I think Diaz probably plays 60 in game week 4. And then, of course, after that, nobody knows what the minutes are going to be. But if you're looking to bring in a Liverpool midfielder outside of Mo Salah, I do think Diaz is a fantastic buy. However, I would wait until the Friday press conferences just for a bit of an update from Jurgen Klopp to see whether there is some sort of fatigue from any of these players that are returning, because both of these have been away for international duty. So to conclude, I think Diaz is going to continue to play for Liverpool week in, week out. Will there be rotation? Absolutely. Minutes will be managed due to the depth that they have in their team. But if you can't get to Mo Salah, I still think Luis Diaz is a brilliant buy in your teams. But I do think Mo Salah is worth the additional if you can easily get that in your teams. And finally, we have a sell for game week 4. And I hate saying this, but it is going to be Arsenal's Bukayo Saka at 10.1 million. And I still think there are so many positives about him. So first up, the underlying numbers have been so good at the start of the season. 1.39 expected goals, 0.93 expected assists, 10 shots. He's been in great form in the opening 3 game weeks for Arsenal, considering they had 10 men against Brighton for such a large part of that game. And importantly, going into game week 4, he is, and he always will be, the Arsenal talisman, even more than ever right now, because as you can see, I have a con here, no Declan Rice suspension for game week 4, and Odegaard looks like he could be ruled out for a number of weeks now. So they were relying on him, they're even more reliant on him, and sometimes that can really play into him as an FPL option, because while the team might actually be hampered by these absences, he is going to step up. And if Arsenal are going to get a result in the next few weeks, I'm almost certain that Saka is going to be the heart of everything good that Arsenal do. And that's the thing I need to mention right now. I've put a few cons here. Tricky next 2 fixtures. Spurs away, followed by Man City away. Let's not be, doubting ourselves here. Arsenal against these 2 games is make or break. They need to get a result in these games, because if they lose both, you could probably say they're out of the title race already. It's that tight each and every season against Man City. So I think Arteta knows the importance of these games, and Spurs will always give you chances. So while it is a tough fixture, let's be real. Would you be surprised if Bukayo Saka was to deliver in this game against this Spurs defence? Absolutely not. And I can see Arsenal still putting up positive results in both of these games. So I don't think Saka is just a simple sell because the fixtures are bad. No. I don't think that's the case at all. I really do think Saka could do well over this period. The problem with Bukayo Saka is his price. 10.1 million, when we're coming into fixtures like we saw with Liverpool, where they are either cheaper or he is a cash cow for someone like a Mo Salah. It's just very difficult to keep someone like Bukayo Saka for the next 2 games with the injuries and absentees that they have, when you can easily go to another team who are playing just as well as Arsenal with better fixtures. And again, we need to remember, Champions League is a thing for Arsenal as well. So while it's a problem for Liverpool, it's also going to be a problem for Arsenal. So that's the thing with Saka. I think it is a reluctant sell, because I still think he could do well over these next 2 game weeks. But I feel like we do need to part ways with him, because there are better options available. Even someone like a Cole Palmer, who isn't even involved in Chelsea's Conference League team, he is also a great option that is going to have guaranteed minutes. But knowing that he could come back into our teams for game week 6, and that's the big thing right now. If you have your wildcard available and you're doing it in game week 6, I think it's an easy sell. However, if you've used your wildcard or you have no plan to go back to him in game week 6, I think you really do need to put a plan in place, because if you don't have an easy way to get him back, I think then maybe it's just a keep. You keep him through this period because you're going to want him for game week 6 and 7 regardless. So maybe just biting your tongue over this period is the route to go for. But all in all, I do think it is a sell, a reluctant sell, but there are just better options available in the game right now. Yes, guys, okay, that's going to wrap up today's video. I really hope that has provided some value. And again, there are so many players to talk through. If you want me to discuss any, put them in the comment section and I'll be sure to answer them. As always, if you enjoyed it, make sure to drop a like on the video. And of course, smash that subscribe button for daily fantasy content. Now that the international break is over, we are back, baby. Have an amazing day. Take care and I'll see you very soon. Cheers.